losing weight, just point blank, has a lot more to do with your nutrition than it does with exercise. In fact, I can cite several studies and several books from medical doctors that will say that exercise, in fact, has very little to do with losing weight. It's mostly in the kitchen.
Welcome to the Good Life.
But what's up, everybody? Glad to be back. Welcome back to another episode of the Good Life Visual Audio Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, C. Muzan. I got Coach could be here in the building. Say what's up, Coach.
What up, though? Listen, we are your uncle's behind the mic, your brother's behind the board. I thought I had it that time, guys. I really thought I had it. Oh, man. All right, we'll try again next week.
One day we'll get it. You just gotta keep pushing through, man. Practice your lines.
That's right. Just gotta get back. Just gotta get back on the court. Keep practicing.
That's it, man. We talking about practice? Are we talking about practice?
Yeah. We're talking about practice. Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
We are talking about it.
That's right.
Either way, we're here. We're practicing. Hey, shout out to everybody that's been tuning in, checking into the podcast. Kabia and I so appreciate you guys, and we appreciate the engagement. We appreciate you engaging with any of the short form content or any of the clips or anything that comes out, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We appreciate it. As always, if you need more access or you want more access, join us over on Facebook. Again, our Facebook group. We are continuing to grow, and we are continuing to drop resources and tips and tools in there so that, again, everyone that is listening can continue to build their life, design the life they don't need a break from, get all of the resources and things you need to get better in your health and your financial life. Join us over on the Facebook group if you're not there yet, because that's where it's all going down. And as always, again, being here back on the show, if you're watching this live right now, kudos to you for being on. We appreciate you. If you're watching this on the replay, tune in. Every Wednesday, we go live and record these so you can be ahead of the game. Join us over on LinkedIn. We might have some changes up and coming to our YouTube. Stay tuned to that because we'll let you know and we'll give you guys the insight on where to find us. But we may be switching some things up very soon, just to continue to make sure that everyone that wants to hear the information is actually getting it. So we're excited about what's happening. Any Detroit news, man? Anything?
I've already told you guys, but I'm going to tell you again. The Detroit Pistons, with the new coach, Monty Williams, will be in the Western Conference Finals next year.
They're actually
Eastern Conference Finals. Eastern Conference Finals. It doesn't even matter who's in it. In fact, you know what? We'll take it up 2 notches. NBA Finals. NBA Finals will be the Lakers and the Pistons next year. And the Lions will be in the playoffs top 4. Just saying.
But we need to mark this. I think we need to start a counter of like predictions.
Lions are going to the playoffs. That's for sure.
You definitely, I don't know.
Lions are going to playoffs.
Okay, you might get playoff. I don't know. Football's hit or miss because of injuries. So first off, sidebar, I don't bet on sports. I never bet on sports. I'm not a sports bettor. I don't really bet on anything in all honesty. But I definitely, if I did sports bet, I wouldn't bet on football. I know some people think football is easy to bet on, but like,
why would they think that?
Because there's a lot of different like options from like,
I know nothing about betting, to be honest. And honestly, I'd probably keep it that way.
Listen, I'm right there with you, man. It's even though it's like a $1 trillion industry, just so everyone's aware of that.
I love to see the chart, the growth chart. Like, because now that the sports leagues, I mean, definitely the NFL for sure, but also it sounds like the NBA, et cetera, are embracing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to explode.
It is. Maybe that's a good investment, right? We're talking wealth around here. Maybe
gambling?
Relax. Not actually gambling, but investing in right? Sports booking companies or casinos
like
or right,
DraftKings.
the gambling industry, right? Finding out where you can have ownership in that would probably be smart because it's only going to go up. There's only going to be more bet. It's going to only open up to more sports. These states are taxing it like crazy. They're making money off of it. So it's just going to keep growing. So, yes, betting on sports may not be the thing financially that you want to do, but finding companies that actually owns, sports booking or right casinos, gambling, wherever gambling happens, you might want to pay attention to those from an investing standpoint.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
So you are not telling the audience to go invest in gambling.
definitely not.
Definitely not.
Definitely not.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure. Just making sure. Just saying.
Definitely not. But every once in a while, a parlay does, scratch the itch here and
No, no,
there.
no, 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 no. Let's no. Just scratch the itch. What is the no?
I'm,
No. Hopefully there is no itch.
I'm feeding into all you gamblers out there that just scratch your itch of betting on things incessantly.
Yeah.
Not I though. Not
Not
I.
I. Not
Not
I.
a fan.
Not I.
Not a fan. Not a fan.
Not the kick for me.
Not the kick. Not the kick. But it's happening. Pivot from gambling news. Let's go into our
2x2.
Here
Today's
we
two
go.
by two is pretty hype. I'm very excited for today's 2x2 because it's one that I've actually been watching for quite a while there. So solid.
It's right in your wheelhouse. We're talking about downtown San Francisco. Those of you that are in the area or have been in the area, San Francisco's commercial real estate is facing a bit of a crisis. Here's what the article says. It says downtown San Francisco, once a hotspot for commercial real estate, is now facing significant challenges. The combination of retail store closures, concerns over crime rates, tech company layoffs, and the growing emphasis on remote work has led to staggering decline in foot traffic, which plummeting nearly 60% compared to pre-pandemic levels, leaving 18 million square feet of vacant office space. Man, what's happening
Yeah.
up in San Francisco? What's going on?
This is huge, and this is one to be watching for the ages because, on one hand, it's hard to see a city like San Francisco, having a complete downturn, right? In the sense of like it actually stays vacant for this long. However, I think the thing to pay attention to here is the unique mixture of circumstances, unique situation that's going on with San Francisco specifically. The tech layoffs, right? So that's huge. The tech layoffs are huge because San Francisco is a city that got its boom from the tech layoffs. The crime rates are also huge. And it's not necessarily violent crime. Living in San Francisco, I can tell you it's stuff like brazen shoplifting, right? So stores like luxury stores like Louis Vuitton, etc. I mean, I've seen multiple videos of people walking into these sort of stores, making a handful of grabs of bags, luxury bags, etc., and then bam, they're out the door. Now they can't, whether it's security or officers, typically don't chase these individuals because one, it gets dangerous, and two, you can barely prosecute them due to the laws in San Francisco. I'm actually would have to look up those specifically. However, I know that they're not really prosecuting them, right? So there's no incentive for these individuals to essentially risk their lives in a lot of situations to stop this crime, if you will. And so store owners, I mean, if I was a store owner, I would look at this like, man, not only is foot traffic going down, tech layoffs are going off, individuals can just go into the store and just take stuff. All right. I saw a video once of a guy just taking a whole tray of phones from a store and running out and just walking, not even running, walking out the door and knowing that nobody's going to stop him. Carjackings, as people know, are definitely always been a thing in San Francisco and probably continue to be a thing more than ever. And then the remote work aspect. So not only tech layoffs, but also remote work in the sense of like, if I can work remotely, for a tech company, make the same amount, and live somewhere much cheaper, why wouldn't I do that? Right. And a lot of people, the pandemic, I think, accelerated these problems. So it's one or two things that's going to happen. It's either, you know, signs of a huge downturn in terms of, again, not commercial real estate specifically, right, for the reasons I outlined, or it's a great opportunity for those with liquidity to perhaps get into a market like San Francisco at a price point that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So it's one of those two things. Most of the people I'm listening to think it's a downturn and San Francisco is going down the toilet. But it's very hard for me to see that it will completely go down the toilet. So it might be like halfway flushing.
A halfway flushing toilet. Understood. I agree with all those things. I think they're all a culmination of like what's happening from the money standpoint. Man, it's I wonder what, like, who's going to come in and like scoop this stuff up, because again, from a wealth building standpoint, the first place my mind goes is, not a lot of people have had access to buying commercial buildings and commercial properties and those types of things. So at the end of the day, right, like when now this stuff is on the market, who's going to pick it up? Who's putting themselves in a position to be able to actually do that? And I think, again, regardless of the crime rates or all the stuff, San Francisco is going to be prime real estate. And I think that eventually people will get back to actually finding better usage for that commercial real estate, like whatever the case is. But I think there's a real wealth play here. I don't think the city's deteriorating. I just think there's a little bit of, there's definitely a wealth play here. So shout out to San Francisco. Shout out to Northern California.
With that said, man, I think, what are we talking about today? Today's the biggest biggest health the biggest health myth. And of course, of course, we're going to take you through them, a couple of them for you here today.
That's right. And I'm start off with the first one, and then we'll dive right back in.
Health myth number one: you can lose weight with exercise alone. That's the health myth that we're talking about. We can lose weight with exercise alone. Now, the reason why this may be considered a myth, and I'll go ahead and give you both sides of the coin here, so you can decide for yourself, essentially, what degree, because I think there is a certain level of degree to this. So losing weight, just point blank, has a lot more to do with your nutrition than it does with exercise. In fact, I can cite several studies and several books from medical doctors that will say that exercise, in fact, has very little to do with losing weight. It's mostly in the kitchen, right? It's mostly in the kitchen, and we've all heard this. And I've personally found this to be true in terms of clients that I've worked with, in terms of the studies that I've read, etc. I'll give it more like 70-30, right? 70% has to do with the diet, 30% has to do with what you do. Or you can think about it in terms of, if you 70% diet in terms of the size, but in terms of developing muscle, right? Whether you're developing muscle or you're going to be flabby, because we've all seen people that have lost weight that then become flabby, if you will, right? And that's because that's where the exercise comes into play. That's where resistance training comes into play. And exercise is also good in terms of cardiovascular, like for your heart, for your mood, for your brain, for your lungs, etc. But when it comes to losing weight, the best combo that you're really going to see is probably resistance training paired up with a really good diet that's been crafted for you. I'm not necessarily pushing a particular type of diet, but looking at, because everybody is different, right? So, and this probably pairs up with another myth that we have, in that if you exercise, you can eat whatever you want. And this is something that I've seen quite a bit. It says it's a mentality of like, oh man, I worked out today for 30 minutes. That means I can have 2 cheesecakes, 5 burgers, and a beer. Right. So people do sort of like a little bartering system in their head, whether it's backed up by science, whether it's backed up by experience, I don't know. But there's a bartering system that goes, guys, you can't out train a bad diet. That I will say, nothing is 100%. Very few things are 100%, right? But out training a bad diet is one very, 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 very difficult, if possible at all. All right, very difficult, if possible at all. I hear the voices of my clients going, but my brother can eat 8 blah 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 blah, and he never gains a pound. Yes, sure, everybody is different. However, you give it enough time, and it usually balances itself out. Right? It's law of averages. So two myths here: you can lose weight with exercise alone. I don't see that as fully being a myth, because you can definitely lose some weight, but I give it again 70-30, 70% going towards the nutrition. And if you exercise, you can eat whatever you want. That's not necessarily true. Now, if we're thinking about weight, you can get away with quite a bit as long as you're within your caloric count. But you got to think about your actual health. And what I mean by that is the state of your internal organs, things like your metabolic health, right? Things of like how you feel just in general, energy level, brain fog, etc. Those type of things. Even though you're within your caloric range, if you have poor food selection, you're still going to be at risk for certain things that most people don't want. So there's one conversation about weight, but there's also another whole conversation about health, and there's a whole another conversation about performance, right?
Mm.
Those are all different things, right? This is where you see, frustration with, let's say, sports teams and certain, players, such as Zion Williamson, etc. Right? So,
Wrong person to bring up right now.
Yeah, not to name any. Oh man! All right. Hey, shout out Zion, bro. Hey, Zion, you have a full invite to come on the show. A full invite to come on the show.
That's right. Air out your side.
So those are the 2 myths we're starting out with, bro. Any thoughts on those?
No, yeah, man. Let's just start in there. First off, the last thing that you just said, like, there's a big difference between weight. Would you say weight?
Yeah, there's a big difference. The categories that I always look at is sort of appearance, performance, and actual, aesthetics, performance, and actual health, right? And by health, we're looking at sort of more so of your metabolic health, right? Your blood pressure, your any chronic issues or things of that nature, right? That's more of what I consider like health. Performance, more like, you could be healthy, but not necessarily perform at a high level. You could perform at a high level and not be healthy because you're burning, the candle at both ends. You see this quite a bit in professional sports, right? They're burning the candle at both ends, and they retire, and all of a sudden things just like fall apart because they're no longer using all those bandages, in terms of training, etc., to hold things apart. They're not sleeping, and they're playing all the time, etc. So you see that really catch up with folks.
No, that's why that point I wanted to pull out and highlight, because I think that part is something that a lot of people overlook, just from the first 2 myths, just understanding that, like, again, we talk about this all the time on the show, guys. Like, most people are looking for a fix, like the quick fix, the hard, fast rule, just do this and then I'm good. And so I think both of those 2 myths come from both spectrums on there, right? Like I can eat whatever I want, right? If I exercise, I can eat whatever I want. And then the other side of, if I just exercise, I'll lose weight, right? Like, both of those are like this kind of one thing, hard, fast, let me just do this. And it's so, right, again, we talk about it all the time on here. There's so many other factors that come into play that you can't really just stick to one thing. And I think it really comes down to that last part of what you said, of like understanding the difference between, the aesthetics, the weight part, which I think a lot of people pay the most attention to. The reason why they get in the gyms, I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. We're not necessarily thinking about the health side or the performance side. Most people aren't athletes, even though we talk about corporate athletes, and we talk about, like, most people aren't in that rhythm of performing all the time. And so they really get hung up on the weight part. But I think the other ones are equally, if not more important, right, on that side. So I'm glad you made that distinction, but I think that's something that a lot of people are missing.
Yeah. And it's huge. I mean, obviously there are fundamentals, right? There are, a handful of fundamental, we call them the 20% that deliver the 80% of results that we should adhere to. But it's certainly, and so in a lot of ways, one of them is to eat well, right? And we've defined what that looks like, slightly different for everybody, but for the most part, eating whole foods close to the earth will that's a great starting spot for a lot of people. And then to move our body accordingly, like it's designed to move. Like what these two myths are trying to do is say you can, you know, one is more important than the other, or you can only do one and get away with not doing the other. But the truth is, fundamentally speaking, that is those two rules there, or two, you know, ways or fundamental laws still apply regardless. So I think
Absolutely.
that solves that problem. If you just kind of look at overall, what should we be doing?
Yeah.
Myth number three
Number
ish.
three, three-ish. Number three, is it all
Well,
fat?
let's call it two. Let's call it two because we kind of combined the first two.
Combined it. That's all good. This
Yeah.
one is this is one you might hear a bunch, like all fat is bad for you, right? All fat is
Yeah.
bad. That's a myth that's out there. Just take on that side. I know it has a lot to do with, you know, fat free this and right,
Yeah.
lower fat on this. But
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
thought on that?
So we're just now really kind of dealing with a lot of the negative side effects, if you will, of the fat-free craze starting in the 1960s and beyond, where everything became fat-free and fat being demonized for all things that are related with poor and chronic health, etc. Now, of course, we now know that's not true. There are good fats and fats that are less desirable. Not going to go too much into the science here, but you know, we have monounsaturated fats that you might see on labels, polyunsaturated, saturated, trans fat. And most people understand that trans fat is not where you want to be. However, when you really look at it, it's when you make the right selection in terms of foods, right? The point that I want folks to kind of walk away with is when you make the right selection in terms of food, like you're eating whole foods without genetic modification, organic, etc. In terms of just from the earth, you kind of solve a lot of these issues because what you find, for example, in meat is you find like um, the right sort of fats come in combination with the right, whether it be carbohydrates or protein, right? So the nature makes the right pairing, right? And so if we don't modify too much what nature is giving us, we really don't even necessarily have to worry about it. Where you get into like the trans fat, et cetera, and fats that are not necessarily good for us is where we try to, you know, process seed oils and process meats and process the processing where humans are intervening in the process of, you know, in the natural order of things and creating an unstable substance, essentially, right? Or chemistry, in terms of its chemistry and its makeup, it's unstable. So it messes with your body and causes all types of things to occur from there. The one difference that I think folks should understand is probably more so between visceral and subcutaneous fat. Now, this is like the fat that, you know, if you grab your abdominals and if there's like fat that, you know, it moves around but jiggle a little bit, right? You know,
Mm,
big belly, you know, jiggle a little bit, right?
mm.
Versus the fat where when you touch your belly, it's hard, like it's clearly fat, but it's hard. All right. Studies have shown that we much prefer the fat that jiggles
I'm sure.
than the fat that's hard because the fat that's hard, known as visceral fat, is fat around your organs, right? So
Mm.
it's fat around your organs, and this causes a ton of issues. And this is typically what we see. You see that big belly that's like hard, not a little bit of extra energy, if you will, jiggling around your waist, and your body can tap into when the proper situation is presents itself, right? So those two things, I think people should know the difference between. Now, of course, you know, if you're reading the label a little, if you're having to read the label on most of the foods that you're eating, um let's just say eat foods that don't require labels. Let's just say that. Let's simplify it. Eat foods that don't require labels, and you'll probably be good in terms of the fats. But knowing that, hey man, when I look at my abdominal, I'm seeing visceral fat, like this is hard fat around the internal organs. That's a little bit more serious and one that we should deal with right away.
Yeah, the statement that I've heard is, or I've learned was, don't eat anything. Try not to eat things where you can't pronounce everything on the label,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like if
yeah.
there's a bunch of different chemical mixtures, monothidoxine, right? Like all these random things that are in there. If you can't read all of the ingredients in there and actually pronounce them, it's probably not going to be good for your body,
Yeah.
right? So whether there is a label or there isn't a label, just understanding what is going in and what we're putting in our body, I think is the important part. That tell me the two names of the belly fat again. The
Yeah, so you have your jiggly fat, which is subcutaneous fat, and your visceral fat, which is the hard fat around the internal organs.
I feel like once you said that, like everyone started touching their belly. I know I did. I was like, oh, hard, soft, okay, jiggly.
Never have you been more excited to have a little bit of jiggle.
I know,
You're
right?
like, yeah.
But it's funny because I now can come across in my memory people like older men specifically that had like hard bellies. Like they were
Yeah.
just, I remember them when I was younger, it's kind of like, hugging them or shaking their hand. And I would remember like their stomachs were hard, but they were clearly big bellies, right?
Big belly but hard. That's the
Yeah,
worst.
it's
Well,
tough.
that's the most concerning.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
because they're again now learning this stuff, and I hope everyone that's listening, like you're learning some of these terms, because again, we talk about awareness all the time. So just being aware that there's just because it's around your stomach doesn't mean it's the same type of fat, right? Like that there's differences. So us really diving in and people really diving into that, I think is important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
for
So
the
this
fat
is a
side.
lot more than like, oh, I need to lose a couple pounds. If you have visceral hard fat around the internal organs, I mean, uh, just think about it. We have to protect the internal organs, number one. And this kind of takes us into our next myth.
It does. So myth number 3, 4, I don't know if you're counting out there, but this myth actually is the other side. Says, hey, six pack abs are the epitome of health. That's a myth, right? If somebody's got six pack abs, most people, and we just kind of went through a little bit of this aesthetic conversation, but most people in the world will be like, oh, they're super healthy. They're super fit. They got six pack abs. That must mean they're the healthiest. Uh, but that's not always the case, huh?
It is not always the case. And just like all of these myths, there's kind of two sides that require a little bit of explanation. So, and to say that six-pack abs are the epitome of health in and of itself would be a myth because that's not necessarily true to your point. I would even use personal experience. When I was younger, more in my 20s, trained a lot, but had the six pack. In fact, dare I say, had the 8 pack. Moving towards the 10 pack,
The
and
good
I
old
wasn't as
10 pack.
healthy.
Understand.
Right?
That's
I
right.
had gut issues. I had back pain. I had stuff, and there's a certain, you can hold your body in a certain position, or work the muscle in a certain position, or starve yourself in a certain way to get that appearance, or use certain substances to get that appearance, as a lot of models, and especially male models, right? With all that pressure to look a particular way. So yes, the aesthetic may be there, but is the health there and is the performance there? And that's not necessarily true. So to say it's the epitome of health, I would say is a myth. However, I do think a flat belly, or just like we described with the fat around the organs and the round, can tell us a lot about the health of an individual, right? So, if you have a hard, round, big belly, that's telling us something, right? And it's very important that we pay attention. You've got a good amount of subcutaneous fat going on. You probably have some colon issues, right? You probably have some buildup, right? You some you might even have, whether it's your large intestine, small intestine, most likely your large intestines, and diverticulitis, right?
Diverticulitis.
Thank you, sir. Diverticulitis. So hey, sometimes the African tongue just gets me, right? I do the best I can, but some of that going on as well. I've seen a lot of that. a lot of issues, right? They say that you can have anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds of fecal matter in your large intestines stored up. And if you ask, if you see some of these colonoscopies going on, that's probably true. It might be even harder, right? And we've talked about how colorectal cancer is going up tremendously, right? So uh, if you have that sort of belly going on, I mean, like it tells us something, and we should pay attention to it. Versus if you don't, then if you have low visceral fat versus low body fat in general, that tells us something. If you have muscle development, right? So you clearly have to have some muscle development to be able to have a flat belly, like, or and we're not talking about just like a flat belly, right? But we're talking about like a defined belly. Like you could also just be skinny fat, right? If you're skinny fat, we see that as well, or core control, having good core control going on. So in a way, a flat belly or a six pack or whatever it is does tell us a lot. However, in this day and age, a flat belly or a six pack can be, faked in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy. The same way that, of course, eggs could be great for us, or eggs with a particular color of yolk. But now we know that certain people who were not named here have found ways to fake that color, right? Whereas it looks like it's good, but it's not. Same thing with like some coloring of meat, right? And coloring of vegetables. Like they faked the signs of good health. However, when you take a closer look, it's actually fake.
That's so good. There's a lot of fake meat out here. You talk about fake eggs. There's a lot of fake meat out here. There's a lot of meat that's been tampered with. I saw something that said salmon that comes out, it normally doesn't have that pink
Yeah,
color,
there's
right?
another example. Yes, a great example. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. And they have to like actually add in that food color
yeah.
in order for people to actually buy it because we're so trained to think that that's supposed to be the color of salmon.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I mean. So yeah, so you see a lot of those things happening, and it's a give and take, right? It's a give and take in the market. What are folks looking for? If we can provide, we'll actually provide. But if we can make it look like what it's supposed to look like for a cheaper price, get a bigger profit, I mean, maybe we do that, right? So there's a lot of
Yeah.
imitation out there.
A lot of imitation. So don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be fooled if you see someone with a six pack or if you have a six pack yourself. Does that
Yes,
does not necessarily mean that you are healthy in the
correct.
ways that people may think. So
Correct. However, I would say it's also not something to be like, to throw back. Oh, you're not healthy. Well, to get a six pack, you have there is work involved,
for
right?
sure.
It does tell us something, but it doesn't necessarily mean the epitome. I think that's where the issue is, the epitome of health, because you can not have a six pack and still be very, very healthy.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very true. I think it's a great point. Let's lead into myth number five.
let's
Myth
do
number
it.
five. Heard this a bunch. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now,
Oh, my
I
favorite.
didn't think that was a myth. Like I thought that was true to some degree. But I always thought just how we're eating breakfast or what we're eating for breakfast is the real issue. But tell me your take on it.
Yeah, so this is a great one. If you've been following me on Instagram, I've made some content on this, some of which has received quite a bit of, let's call it feedback.
Mm,
And because again here, again here, the misunderstanding is in the language, right? So the epitome for the last one, and then for this one, it's breakfast, because the term breakfast has been hijacked by big food to
mm,
mean that it is the meal that you eat early in the day, right? Early in the day that typically consists of insert the blank. Now, if the marketing or whatever is from the meat industry, they'll tell you bacon or they tell you eggs. If it's from the cereal, they'll tell you General Mills, they'll tell you it's cereal, etc. So the misconception is that is what constitutes as breakfast. But really, to understand what's going on here, you have to break the word apart into its original meaning. which is to break your fast,
Mhm.
right? So when we go to bed, most of us aren't eating while we sleep. Now, I say most because, again, there's no 100%. I know some of you weirdos out here are doing some stuff. Right? I joke, I kid. However, right, if you're not eating while you're sleeping, you're inevitably in a fast. And if you sleep 8 hours, well, you're certainly in a fast, right? And when you wake up, you've been fasting. So, how you reintroduce food to your system is what we call to break your fast. Does not have to be in the morning, does not have to be cereal, does not have to be any particular meal. However, what you take in first, just by the law of order of operations, matters tremendously because your body is ready. It is theoretically, it is emptied, right? Your stomach is emptied a little, as much as it, based on what you've been doing, right? So it's ready to receive, and the first thing that it hits is going to have a much greater impact on a DNA level, on a cellular level, on just like how your body receives and functions, right? It's going to have a much greater impact just by being the first meal that you put in, or the first thing that you put in. So breakfast, how you break your fast, is the most important, in the sense of like it has a great impact. However, eating breakfast like pancakes and waffles and toast and those things early in the morning is not important. Now, when you break the word apart and you understand that distinction, now you understand, yes, it's a myth, but it's also not a myth, in the sense of what you've put in first is really, really, really important. But that has been hijacked by all the marketing that we see out there and whatnot, and told us that this is what it means to breakfast.
So true. And that's where, again, why we're debunking these myths, right? Because breaking your fast, and what I love how you said it, man, like what you reintroduce to your body, what you introduce to your body first is important. It's important, right? So that's where the statement can be true, but what we're entering, what we're putting in for American breakfast, again, was hijacked, right? Bacon, eggs, pancakes, waffle, cereal, all that type of stuff.
Yep. And
Right.
everybody has their opinion. Everybody's like, yeah, bacon and eggs. Some people are like, blah, blah, blah. Quite frankly, again, nutrition is a dynamic relationship between mind, body, spirit complex and the environment. So I find it difficult to say that one must do this, right? What if you don't have bacon and eggs where you live? Then what?
Right.
What do you do?
Right.
So, yeah, that's another one right there.
Listen, I think that again, these conversations are important because we just have to get our words down. We have to get our language down. We have to understand what breakfast really is about, but really just more so about our bodies and understanding what our bodies need. So
I think folks will make a much better, and I'll leave it here, much better decision in terms of their breakfast if they think about it as, I'm about to break my fast.
mm,
How do I want to break my fast?
mm.
And I think when you think about it that way, it sets the mind to make better decisions. At least for me, I don't know for all.
Yeah. I agree with you, but I can also see the other side. I'll play devil's advocate for a second, because what about the person that's not aware of fasting protocol and what fasting means, right? Like I can think a layman's mind, somebody's mind that says, if I'm going to go without eating for a certain time, the next meal I have will be a big one, right? Like that is almost logical for some people, where it's like, okay, I've gone without. Now I need to have more because I just took this time of going without. So it's
Sure.
really for the person that that maybe doesn't understand fasting, like, hey, should be something light. Don't let your body do as much work. All those things might be different for the person that understands fasting versus not.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'll say this. It's not necessarily, although the size of the meal is important, it's more so the quality,
Mm.
right? The quality of the meal. I think that's number one, and then the size of the meal. But more than anything, it's what do you want Yeah, to your point, that does make sense. Somebody thinking like a big old hearty meal that that slows down their intestines, et cetera, et cetera. Sure, 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 sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't think people make that connection a lot of times. I don't think, again, this is a part of the awareness. I don't think people
yeah,
understand.
that's the education piece.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the education piece. Well, you know what? Those people should probably just watch the show and go ahead and follow us on Instagram, and we'll talk about this stuff all the time.
That's right.
Um, because you want to think about it as a plane taking off or anything taking off, a car, right? And of course, the better the acceleration, go to 0 to 60 and blah 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 blah. But I have yet to see anything that goes 0 to 100 in 0 minutes, right? So there's still a ramp up, even if that ramp up is quicker,
Mhm.
because it's a better quality car. The body is a car, and your body's ramp up is not as quick as a Tesla or something, right?
Mhm.
It does need a little bit of a ramp up period. So giving it the best quality you can, and maybe you should never really be overeating anyway, all right? So putting
Yeah.
those things in place, I think, will get you
Bro,
pushing.
listen, just as you're talking, it's popping up for me because, again, we do the show together. You, you coach me, right? Like, I have heard you talk about health for a very long time, right? Like, this stuff makes sense to me, but for some reason I feel like pe- like this is a place of education and awareness. Like, people just don't understand, just from that basic, like, your body ramps up. What does that mean? Like, I don't think I think there's a group of people that probably don't even understand what that means, that, like, there is a ramp up here. Like, your body has to get things going, that your organs have to move in a certain way. I think there's such a fundamental level of, like, not understanding our bodies and
Hmm.
how they operate, that, like,
Hmm.
even little things like this we have to break down and, like, take time to
Got
be
it.
like, what is a ramp up? Like,
Yeah.
I know if I eat, I'm full. What else are you telling me? Right? Like, what does my body need to do? I think there's a place of education there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So, how do I explain this? Let's look at, for example, when you're working out, right? There's a beginning, middle, and an end, right? So, in the beginning, you're doing things to do what? To increase blood flow, to warm up the body, right? To start excreting the necessary fluids to even begin digesting, right? Or the process of going. I would use another example, but this is a family show. This is a family show. But
Pause. Pause.
but in the sense of, like, even like chewing your food slowly enough so that the bulb in the bulb of food in your mouth can be properly covered with the right enzymes to start the breakdown process, right? Our body is not just, we don't just take food, put it in our stomach, and it zaps, and that's happened. There's a digestion process. So if you have a large amount of hard to digest food just come down into the belly and sits there, right? It's going to cause some issues, in the sense of, like, digesting that food is going to be a lot harder than if you were to slow down that process and introduce it to the body slowly.
Mhm.
Now, we're not talking about, we don't need to sit there for 4, 5, 6 hours, or that's not what we're talking about here. But we're not talking about eating as much food as you can possibly eat as quickly as you can possibly eat. From just a common sense perspective, you typically don't feel that great afterwards, even
Mhm.
if you know nothing about any of this stuff. If you eat a very large meal very quickly, how do you feel?
Sluggish, terrible, just no energy. It's
Now, if
rough.
you eat a very large, poor quality meal very quickly, these things start to compound on each other,
Mhm.
right? So, eating a very good meal, easily digestible, slowly introducing that to your body, those stack up too. So, a lot of this stuff, I think, if you just apply it to other things that already make sense to you, you
Yeah.
start to see the same parallels.
Yeah, that's so, and because again, a lot of this stuff is it's easy to understand. It's simple to understand, right? But like we have to be exposed to it. So just, and I'm glad you broke that down. Just from something as basic as like that meal, that the food that you're chewing, like it has to get broken down to go into your body, like
Yeah.
enzymes, like the digestion process, like in your mouth, it just moving around and then heading down is all about how it breaks down and how, how quickly it can break down, all of those types of
How
things, right?
absorbed,
Hmm.
extracting what you need from it, excreting of the waste, all of that has to happen. And when we start treating, our body like bumper cars, that's when we start to run into issues. Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
at times, sometimes I think all the technical jargon can actually confuse folks and leave them not knowing what to do with analysis paralysis.
Hmm.
But just think about your grandma's rules, right? If you're eating a meal, sit down at the table, focus on the meal, slow down, chew your food with your mouth closed. Right? Don't be eating like you haven't eaten in 20 years. Right?
Hmm.
These are manners, right? But they also they actually have a health component to it as well. There's courses in meals for a reason, and you space them out differently for a reason. You have different combos for a reason. You don't start with beef as your first course for a reason,
Sure.
right? So or maybe you do. I don't know. You got the color and background. You back me up. You give us some insight here, but
You could, but it normally isn't. Maybe a beef tartare or something, like, depends on how fancy you want to go and
yeah,
all of that.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, hey, you break it down for us. Let's. I feel how much of it is like I feel like the more modern we go, the more we start to break some of these older rules of how to do things. So
Yeah.
maybe go to the classic. Tell us about the classics.
I mean, you can break things down into 3 course, 5 course, 7 course.
Give us the 5 or 7. Give us the 5 or 7.
Just know, the more courses you go, the more fine dining it is, right? You're not gonna find a 5 course meal at a casual dining place. But typically, right, you're starting off always something light, something refreshing. Um, man,
Like what? Salad, a soup? What are we talking about?
normally one of those two. It could just be a bite of something, like I said, depending on how fine you want to get. Like, you might just have, gosh, why am I blanking on the word?
Pickled
It's
cucumber with the
no.
sauteed.
There's a term for it. It's called an amuse bouche. There we go. And a and
Ooh, hit him with
and
it.
and amuse bouche. And amuse bouche is literally just like a taste of something as you're getting started in your meal. As you're getting
Mm.
started, to like wet the palate, to like give you something, but it's literally
Wet
just
the
a,
palate.
yeah.
Break that down. See, there we go. It's the same thing. Wet the
Yeah.
palate. Go ahead. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Break
So
that down.
again, you walk into a restaurant, you haven't had anything to eat for some time. The first thing is going to get your pause, your mouth prepared, right? To be able to experience all the
Yeah,
rest of the stuff.
lubricate that.
That's right. It's going to get your mouth
Yeah.
prepared, your palate prepared to experience all the rest of the food. So normally that first amuse bouche is just a bite of something. It's just something. It's good. Normally you come right behind it with a small drink. Some people do like a small sorbet,
Mm.
right behind it, to like cleanse it, something that's lemony, and then you get into like your
Something lemony. Okay. Yeah,
lemony,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like then you get into like your first course. Can be soup, can be salad, can be small appetizer, beef tartare, something very tiny, right? And then let's say you had beef tartare for the first, then your salad is your second course, or your soup is your second course, and salad becomes the one behind that. And then normally you're going to get, again, 5 course, you're going to get an entree type of thing that normally in culinary land, it's, pro- protein, starch, veg,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's sauce, right? Protein, starch, veg, sauce. That's normally what you're going to have. Depends on, again, where you're going. It could be meat, starch, veg type of thing, and then it could follow up with a pasta. They could do a pasta first, they could come back around with a meat and veg type of combination, and then normally you end off with like some form of dessert, something sweet, some espresso, something like that, right? So typical 5 courses, probably range, something like that. Again, it depends where you go, but that first one is normally the amuse bouche, normally a lighter appetizer, something to cleanse the palate to get your mouth going.
There you go. So it all kind of lines up, man. Yeah, thanks for breaking it down. I think it's very nice to add that perspective so people can connect. Because some people might know that aspect of things, but maybe don't know why it's done in that way,
Yeah.
right? It's done in that way in the sense a lot of it is good for your body, but also gives you actually the greater sense of pleasure in the meal.
Mhm.
Right? How do you enjoy? You typically don't enjoy a meal by scarfing everything down very, very quickly, right?
That's right.
Where's the enjoyment in that? Right.
That's
So
right.
it's a slow down process of taking that down.
It's so true. Like when you parallel this stuff with just being in fine dining, higher quality food,
Yes.
right? Better,
Smaller portions.
smaller portions, better process of cooking the food. But
Yes.
typically people eat the food slower.
Hmm.
Like that's just a part of it. Right. When my wife and I were in Southern California, when we were in LA, we wound up doing a couple of those kind of like, you know, tasting menu 8-course, 9-course type of thing, like just enjoy the night out type. And those were 3-hour dinner sessions. Those are two and a
Yeah.
half, 3-hour dinner sessions. And these aren't large plates. These are small, tiny plates. There's a couple bites on each plate, right? Maybe you're getting on your main course, you're getting 7, 8, 9 bites out of it, but that's about it. But we're taking our time. We're enjoying each bite. We're not just, let me get to the next course. All right, I'm done. Right. So even in the way that it's prepared, even in the way that it's consumed, right, all comes from better quality. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, once what's interesting to me is that as we drop down in price or as we drop down in status or as we drop down, it becomes just about getting full.
mm,
Right. Let's
mhm,
let's let's so then you see a lot more bread for no reason, a lot more carbs for no reason, a lot more, things that just take up space, but they maybe don't necessarily have a particular function, right? In the meal, whether it's for enjoyment sake or if it's for what I'm talking. So I think it's very interesting that when we look at it, as the food gets poor, all the way down to like fast food, it just
mhm.
becomes a full meal for $4.
That's right.
Well, obviously you're paying a lot more than $5, but you may not be paying it right then and there.
Right. That's right. That's right. And again, that's why we bring awareness to these conversations and we talk about it because you have the choice. I know what could be just said, right? Somebody's listening is like, well, I don't have the money, right? Like I don't have the time. I don't have. Well, that's why we're trying to help you get all of those things. We're trying to help you secure your finances so that yes, you don't. Money gives you options. Let's just repeat that thousands of times. Money brings options. If you would like the option to eat better, then we probably should have some money, right? If all you can afford out there is $4 for a meal, right? We've all been there, or not all of us, but a lot of us have been there. I've been there, right? Like I've been there. So it's one of those things where we now just don't have a lot of choices. That's all. You just don't have a lot of choices for that $4. You're choosing to use it on getting full. You could take that same $4 and choose to get something right that's more nutritious for you, but we're making those choices. If you want to have better choices at better food and not feel stressed about your financial, like, well, then get the finances in order. Get the finances in order, and you could give yourself the option of eating the way you want to, and not just what's in your environment,
Yeah.
because we know that's a
Yeah.
struggle.
And a big piece of that is education as well, because you don't need to be having 5, 7 course meals to eat well.
That's very true.
You don't need to be blowing money fast to feed yourself nutritious food, but you do need a little bit of education, and you do need a little bit of awareness of what is happening.
That's right. That's right. As we go into this last myth, I think as we wrap up, this last myth that we're going to talk about says bottled water is better for you than tap water. That's a myth. Why is that a myth, Coach? Like, talk to us
So
about this.
again, like this, it kind of depends, right? So, and saying that bottled water is better, well, what is the tap water? All right.
Mm.
So that you are able to find out the quality of your water from your city, from most places in the U.S. You can look it up and see the quality of the water. And for some places have better quality waters than others, right? So if you live in a poor quality of water place, you might be better off drinking bottled water. In fact, there was a period of time in history where it was safer to drink alcohol than it was to drink the water because the water was so polluted. Okay. So, but if you live in a place that has great water, you've looked it up, you've tested it, etc., then maybe bottled water is not the best because there is no living water in bottle. If you live in the mountains, and you're getting the snow water from the clean mountains, and everything is driven down from and being filtered by nature, that might be better, right? I was actually in Canada with a friend of mine, and we went to a spring, and got some mountain water straight from. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little sus, right? I was like, what is going on? But when you taste the water, you can actually taste the purity of the water. Right, like it actually tasted different, like you could tell. And they put a sign up and everything of like, oh, this is good, like spring water that you can get. Great, great. Or if you have great well water, that might be better. For me personally, I have a Kangen water machine, so I utilize that. And if I'm not able to utilize that, and I have to buy a bottle of water, I know that there's no living water in bottle. However, that's okay. I might get the mountain spring water in that green bottle with no plastics, right? No pesticides, no any of that stuff in the water. In glass comes out mountain spring water. Great for me. They don't pay us, but you know what? Yeah, that's what I do.
Listen, drop
And
it.
y'all take that with what you will.
Give people the resource. This person on Facebook, not sure because it comes up. Facebook user says one thing for sure: bottled water tastes better than tap water. Again,
Depends.
depending on where you are, right?
Yeah, it depends. Depends.
Depends.
That I've had some pretty. I've had some bottled water where it's like, oh, I don't know. This I feel like now, for example, right? If you have Fiji water is popular for this. You take Fiji water that was bottled like 3 years ago, right? In this tiny bottle in plastic, right? No, thank you. No, thank you. Right. It might taste a little better, but you for sure drinking in quite a bit of things that we don't want in our system.
So for sure, glass is the better way to go.
Glass for
Then
sure.
got it.
That's for sure. And if you're drinking tap, ideally you have some sort of filtration system, whether it's a Berkey or reverse osmosis water, or you have a Kangen machine like I do, where you have some sort of filtration. Now, obviously, you got to do the research to see if that's to the level of filtration that works for you.
Mhm.
And based on the quality of the city of the water, something like a Berkey is made to be taken to a place that has poor water and filtered so you could get clean drinking water. So there's a lot of ways to go about it, but to say just point blank, bottled water is better than tap water, well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends.
It definitely does depend. That was Aaron, by the way. He shouted out. Shout out
Shout
to
out,
Aaron.
Aaron.
Shout out to Aaron. But yes, again, this water conversation, because hydrating ourselves and right, like drinking water is such an important conversation to have. I think we have to give people some education around. I didn't learn. I understood about plastic, but I didn't understand how it was really affecting my water, right?
Mm,
Until I was an adult, right? Like I was, 4 or 5 years ago, right? It really wasn't long ago that I was like Aaron, right? Bottled water is better than tap water, so let me just any bottled water is bottled water. It's better than this, right? Like just
right.
kind of going that direction, and then it's like, oh wait, like man, all this stuff sitting in plastic, right? And right, the water is just kind of absorbing whatever the plastic was in. Like, who makes the plastic? Like, and then you go down this whole rabbit hole of like, oh, this might not be good. And then when you taste different bottled waters, right? Dasani tastes starkly different from Aquapana or Voss water. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's made by Coca-Cola or whatever. It's like, I think it has salt in it. You know what I mean? It clearly tastes different. It clearly tastes different. But I think us being educated about these things, that's really where it all starts. Aaron says, not Dasani. Dasani's gross. Yes, Dasani is gross, as we all know. But either way, this was the other myth that, again, excuse me, that bottled water is better for us than tap water. But again, just like all of these, most of these, it depends, right? It depends where you're at. But for this whole list, guys, as we wrap up the podcast today, for this whole list of myths of health misconceptions, these common ones that we see, we just want you to, again, become more aware of them. If there are any of them that resonated with you, or you're like, oh, that's something I didn't know, or let's reach out to Kabi, like have a conversation, get more information. Once you have that seed planted, the next step is, how do you water that seed, right? So it's with information, it's with execution, it's with testing some of these things out, trying some of these things and actively doing it. But we just don't want you to be fooled by some of the jargon, misconceptions, concepts that you hear out there. We want you to get it directly from us. So closing thoughts, man.
There are a lot of half truths. I think, you know, most people know the straight lies, right? But there are a lot of half truths where the response is, it really depends. So it's important for us all at this stage to live in a modern food environment. Unfortunately, we do have to be very highly educated about the things that we're consuming. And unfortunately, you know, there's more and more things coming out all the time. So we have to evaluate. So go ahead and join that group and make sure that you stay tuned to this, because we'll continue to help you stay on top of those things as they come along. But ultimately, there are a set of fundamental rules that if we follow, will get us, you know, 80% of the results. So although some of this stuff can sound overwhelming too, if we're following the fundamentals, we should be 80% there at least. So
That's right.
That's what I'll leave you guys with.
Keep following those fundamentals, guys, whether it be on the wealth side, whether it be on the health side. Get your foundations, get your fundamentals in order, practice those things over and over again, execute on them, reach out to us, reach out to a coach, reach out to someone that can guide you down the process. We had another episode, I'm not sure what number it was, where we talked about kind of cutting the noise a bit, so to speak, right? All of the different information that's out there. If we're getting overwhelmed, we talked about it being overwhelming with the amount of information. The way we get away from that is having someone that can guide you down the path. You bring all the information that you're hearing, bring it to that person, and then take their advice to be able to guide you to your goals. So that's what we're here to do. We appreciate all of y'all that continue to check in, continue to tap in with us. As always, until next week.
Peace.
Later, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Good Life. We hope you found our discussion helpful and inspiring.
If you enjoy this episode, please take a moment to subscribe and like our channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.
We want to hear from you, our listeners. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please leave us a comment down below.
If you're listening to the podcast audio version, we appreciate you just as much. Thank you for tuning into the Good Life Show. And be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode.
We believe that everyone has the potential to live their best life, and we hope our show helps you get that one step closer to achieving your goal.
If you know someone who would benefit from our show, please share it with them, and thank you for your continued support.
So again, that's it for another week's episode here on The Good Life. We'll see you next week for another inspiring conversation.
Welcome to the good life.